What's good, YouTube? It's your boy coming at you with a review for Dune Part 2. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and start off by just saying I love this movie. It's a really, really entertaining movie from start to finish. This is the first movie since maybe Glass Onion where I went to the theater and I was just engrossed in the movie, and I was just on the edge of my seat, quite literally. In my review of this movie, I'm not going to compare it to the book as much as I can, because there are a lot of changes from the book to this movie. And whenever I talk about movies and whether or not they're good or what I think of them, I don't think it's always fair to compare them to the book. But I do think some of the changes from book to movie are actually what make this movie so good. So I will be mentioning some things here and there, but we'll get to that in a bit. The first two things that I want to talk about with this movie is the visuals and the sound are through the roof, insanely amazing. Each place that we get to visit, whether it's a different spot on Arrakis, or if it's Gadi Prime, or even just kind of like being on the spaceships, is just stunning visually to see, especially Gadi Prime, mostly because of I honestly kind of want to say the contrast that it has with Arrakis. So Arrakis, you get this very vast desert scape, and getting to explore the different Fremen communities, the Sieches. You really get to see kind of their culture and the way they set up their life, and then comparing that to Gadi Prime, where you have this just starkly contrasted different place, I think not only goes a long way to make the movie look visually interesting, but also goes a long way to show, or I guess to expand the universe kind of, because you get to really see the difference between not just the planets, but the cultures within them as well, which I think is just very, very interesting. And then sound wise, like the sound effects, I don't know much about. I'm not like a sound expert or whatever, but it seemed cool when I was in the theater. It sounded pretty cool, and the score, the score is phenomenal. Its use of themes, and its use of tone to underlie different themes within scenes, stuff like that is just, whew, oh my goodness, I just loved it. And then the story, like I said, there's quite a fair amount of changes from the book to the movie, and I guess I'm getting into spoiler territory here, so if you don't want spoilers for the movie, I would back out now. But like one of the big changes is that Paul's sister Aaliyah is not born at any point in this movie, which I think is a interesting but kind of cool change, because it gives you the opportunity to kind of be mystified by her character, and because Aaliyah mostly speaks through Jessica, and kind of that one scene where Jessica and Paul are talking back and forth through Aaliyah, kind of, or like Jessica speaking on Aaliyah's behalf and Paul is talking to Aaliyah. It makes for a really interesting scene, and it makes you really want to kind of see who this character is in the next movie. And so I think that choice to not have Aaliyah be born, but still kind of work from behind the scenes and speak through Jessica, communicate with Paul, creates this really cool dynamic that is not only entertaining within the movie, but also kind of entices you to want to come and see the next movie. And it also, because Aaliyah is not born, it means that she doesn't get to kill Baron Harkonnen at the end. And in this case, it kind of falls upon Paul, which I think is really fitting for this story. Because Paul kills the Baron in this movie, the Baron gets kind of that face-to-face shock factor with him creating his own demise, in a sense, by trying to wipe out the Atreides family. And I think that family ties that they have, it also creates for a very a very kind of powerful and a daunting scene almost. And while we're talking about the Harkonnens, Feyd-Rautha is very cool in this movie. He's such a creepy and kind of grotesque dude that he's very, very well contrasted with Paul. The contrast between the two characters really helps build the stakes for their battle. And throughout the movie, you have multiple opportunities to see differences in their style of leadership and their prowess in combat. And so when they do finally meet at the end, even though it's only briefly, it you feel like that it's been built towards and kind of well developed.
May thy knife chip and shatter.
May thy knife chip and shatter.
Also considering the fact that the Bene Gesserit have kind of engineered for both of them to have the potential to become the Kwisatz Haderach. Just such a really cool little setup they had with that. And while we're talking about Feyd-Rautha, how can we not talk about the festival on Gadi Prime? I've already talked about how visually stunning that place is in this movie, but that whole festival with like the ink cloud fireworks and the color contrast happening, oh my goodness, it is, like I said, the contrast between, so there's already the visual contrast between the cultures of the Fremen and the people on Gadi Prime, but this festival right here is also, it showcases the difference between like their cultural values and stuff, because throughout the last movie and in this movie you see Paul having to learn a tribal culture, and especially in this movie you see him having to learn how to use and adapt to their customs and really become ingrained within their society, versus looking at the culture on Gadi Prime, and you really get to see it's kind of this almost, so like if you think in like modern, or not modern, but if you think of like human history going back to like gladiator times, and then you think about how like we've progressed to now where we don't have that as much, but then we still have things like boxing, MMA, etc., where these are kind of like the modern gladiator fights. Gadi Prime really feels like this post-modernization. I don't know if I'm using a term correctly, but it really feels like this post-modern gladiator fight, where we've had like barbaric gladiator fights in the past to like the more modern, sophisticated version of it, and then it feels like their culture just kind of had like this yearn and thirst for more of that, and it regresses back to that kind of a really barbaric version of gladiator fights. I don't really know if I'm explaining that well, or if I'm explaining it correctly, or if I'm relaying how I felt watching it very well. But that whole scene was just a brilliant, like that whole scene is maybe not even 10 minutes long, I would say. Like this video is probably longer than that scene. and yet it feels like it characterizes their culture so well. Oh my god, it's just phenomenal. Um, One thing that I don't like about the movie, and this is again kind of going with a change from the book, and I see why they did this change because the payoff you get from not changing this is really hard to convey cinematically. But I think it was just a little bit over the top and kind of like too much throughout the movie. So in the books, Stilgar is has a good relationship with Paul. But one of my favorite parts in the book is whenever I forget exactly what it was that Paul does, but and he says that he can see in Stilgar's eyes the moment that Stilgar shifted from friend to like fanatic follower, and having Stilgar being the fanatic follower from start of the movie to the end of the movie, a little bit exhausting kind of. It kind of feels old and played out by midway through the movie, and so it's a bit frustrating. I kind of see why they did that change, because that's a really hard kind of message to convey cinematically, of Paul realizing that Stilgar is no longer a friend really, but more of a, like I said, a fanatic follower. Can be a little bit hard to display with as much weight as it has in the book, but it serves its purpose in the movie for creating that something that deserves to be explored a bit, is people who already believe in Paul as the Messiah versus people who don't believe. We kind of need different people to create that tension. And so I think Stilgar was the best character to have to be the one who kind of praises Paul. And then that brings us to Chani, who is very much the opposite. Just wants Paul to be Paul, doesn't want him to be anyone else. That's kind of what brings them together, is that Paul does not want this destiny that's being thrust upon him, and Chani doesn't believe that it is his destiny at all, doesn't believe in all these prophecies or anything. And that's kind of what brings them together, and ultimately ends up being what drives them apart as well, because as much as Paul doesn't believe in this destiny that's being thrust upon him, he is forced to step into that role anyway, kind of by means of there's kind of all the talk throughout the book, or the movie, where he says, I won't go to the south, I won't go to the south, because in the southern part of Arrakis, that's where the more like traditional, the people who really subscribe to, ooh, Paul is the Messiah, people who subscribe to that prophecy and religion, most of the more fanatic people live down in that area. So he refuses to go there because he doesn't want to ascend into that role, but he's forced to, essentially by Jessica's actions. He's kind of forced to step into that role, and him stepping into that role, whether he believes in it or not, is what drives him and Chani apart. By the way, Paul and Chani have a very believable relationship in this movie. It's really entertaining to watch.
It's okay. I'm here. I'm here. It's been a while since you've had one of those nightmares. Tell me, what was it?
I think it starts a little bit suddenly. Like, Chani's friend just kind of being like, oh, like, why are you so interested in him? It seems like Chani's friends kind of tell the audience, oh, you're interested in him, or she's interested in him, rather than letting the chemistry develop naturally. Or at least the catalyst doesn't feel natural. I think the progression of their relationship feels very natural, but that catalyst for their relationship doesn't feel very natural. But I still think it was a believable, entertaining relationship to watch, and the dynamic between them, like I said, the thing that brings them together being the very thing that drives them apart, is also very interesting. I'm looking at my notes here, just trying to see if I have anything else I want to say. Oh, the action in this movie is super cool. From what I've been told, I haven't finished reading the Dune books. I've only barely begun Dune Messiah, starting it for the second time because the first time I started it, I had to stop reading, and then it took me forever to get back into it. But from what I've been told and from what I've read, the rest of the Dune franchise is not as action-packed as this part of the book or this part of the story. So we'll kind of have to see how the movies grow from there. But at least in this movie, I think the action is just phenomenal, very entertaining, very engrossing. It's just people like me personally who feel like just overwhelmed by the amount of Star Wars. I've had like this yearning for a new space epic to follow, and the action in this movie very much gives me that. And it's interesting because the sandworms in Dune are often described as being more akin to fantasy, being more like a dragon, guarding the treasure, which is the spice. And so it's really interesting that you have kind of this fantasy element turned into such a grand and epic sci-fi, like I said, just a space epic. And that's something that's, I think, going to grab a lot of people's attention. I think a lot of people who didn't see the first Dune will go see this movie, and because of that, I think more people are going to be enticed into the franchise. And so, considering from what I've heard, it not being as action-packed as this part of the story, it'd be very interesting to see if that fan base tapers off or continues to rise, and what kind of changes they'll make to keep people enticed if kind of the action is what's getting them in. Something interesting, I guess this will be kind of my final point, because talking about the very end of the movie, one of the last changes I'll talk about is in the book, the guild forces all of the great houses to accept Paul's ascension to emperor, and the movie ends off with them saying the great houses do not recognize your ascension to emperor, and then Paul's line is lead them to paradise. Very menacing. It's really this kind of anti-hero line where like Arrakis is being led to paradise, but the people who stand in his way most certainly are not. And so it creates this really, it leaves a lot more room for the action and the tension to build in this universe versus potentially what is to come in the books. Like I said, I haven't read all of them yet. I've barely begun the second book. But there have been a lot of movies that I really enjoyed that have come out over the past 2 or 3 years. Movies that I was like, oh, I can't wait for this to come out on DVD so I can watch it again. To name a few, like Across the Spider-Verse, Glass Onion. But this is the first movie I've seen in that span of time, maybe another year before that, where I am like ready to buy another movie ticket to go see this. Because that was the theater experience for me. Seeing this movie was the theater experience. So this movie definitely holds a special place in my heart. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to go see the movie. And if you've already seen the movie, let me know what you think of it. If you're involved at all in any part of the Duneverse, let me know in the comments what you think. I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll catch you in the next video. Normally I do my whole little plot thing, but instead I think I'm just gonna shut a book because, Dune, based on it. This is turning into my worst outro. Just stop the video here.